There's so much to talk about. Oh my goodness. Holy cow. How are we even going to begin to cover all of the things that Donald Trump has done in his first 24, 36 hours in office? We're going to talk a little bit about the executive orders that Donald Trump signed on his first day in office. Some of them were quite far reaching. And then we're going to talk about the effect those will have on Israel and the war in Ukraine and immigration. There's a lot to unpack there. So let's get down to it. Make sure you have subscribed to the channel. A lot of people have been telling me they've been automatically unsubscribed for some reason. I noticed that. All of a sudden we lost a whole bunch of subscribers. And I thought, was it something I said? But a lot of people have said that they've just been automatically unsubscribed. Please go check and make sure you are still subscribed. We're this close to 150,000 subs. And that's all because of you guys. You're doing amazing work helping us do the work that we're doing out here in the field. So let's get to the important stuff. First, I want to talk about why I think we didn't have as many protesters as I expected. I thought there'd be massive unrest in Washington, D.C. And that also does reflect a more widespread base of support for Donald Trump than he had the first time. There were a lot of people that I talked to on the street over Inauguration Day, because I was like looking for people that you would say would normally not have voted just by their demographic. Young people, people of color, as they say, would normally not have voted for a conservative, but asking them, why did you vote for Donald Trump? And they're saying, because I can't afford food to eat. And he said he was going to lower food prices because my bills have gone up. My wages have stagnated. It's hard for me to find a job. Economically, Donald Trump did a great job of connecting with the working man in the campaign, going to work at McDonald's, going to work as a trash collector, that kind of stuff was stroke of genius. Just very, very good. And it likely won him the election, at least the popular vote. Now, let's talk about what Donald Trump did in terms of his first executive actions. Now, this was awesome to see, I just have to say. To watch Donald Trump do everything he did on Inauguration Day, and then at the end, in the middle of the night, sit down and at his desk continue signing executive order after executive order after executive order. And in the midst of signing all those executive orders, answering questions from the press corps, who was not being herded around like a bunch of sheep like they did for the last 4 years. In the last 4 years, all of the questions that Joe Biden was given had to be pre-screened, submitted in advance, and approved. And Joe Biden had to be briefed on them and given the answers, usually on a teleprompter beforehand. It's so refreshing to see a president who can actually walk and chew gum at the same time, who doesn't look like a human Roomba wandering around, not sure where he's supposed to go next, who looks completely in control of his faculties. It almost looks like a superpower at this point after watching Joe Biden for 4 years. It's so great. So let's talk about some of his most important executive orders in this MAGA makeover that he did. And, one of the first few that he signed was done at the Capital One Center in front of everybody, which was so awesome because then he actually starts taking the pens and chucking them out into the crowd. The only problem is, like, when he did that, he sort of mixed them all up. And so the people who got the pen had no idea which pen they got, like which pen signed which order, because Trump mixed them all up. And you can see some staffer back in the back going like, no, oh, gee, we had plans for those. Trump was like throwing them out like T-shirts at a hockey game. It was fantastic. But one of the very first executive orders that he signed was a blanket executive order to rescind all of the executive orders of Joe Biden. If I understood that right. And I mean, that's pure genius. Like, this one executive order essentially erases everything Joe Biden attempted to do over the last 4 years, like that, with a stroke of a pen. Start there. That was great. From there, let's just go down the list, okay? First of all, let's talk about the immigration executive orders. He's promised mass deportations, but that's going to be a massive undertaking, and that's Tom Homan's job. And I think that they're doing this very smartly. First of all, the executive orders that Donald Trump signed right at the beginning were intended to motivate people who are in the United States illegally to leave of their own accord, to just pack up and head back south, so that we don't have to deport them. And that's great. It was also intended to staunch the bleeding, that is, to stop the flow of illegal migrants coming across. The Biden administration had implemented this CBP One app, that is a smartphone app where migrants could apply for their asylum claim online and get pre-screened and pre-qualified to come in, so that they didn't count as illegal encounters on the border. And in that way, Biden falsely had been able to claim that they had reduced the number of illegals coming across the southern border. They didn't reduce them, they just reclassified them and pre-qualified them to come in so that they could fly directly into the heartland of America and skip the line altogether. But literally within minutes after Donald Trump took office, the CBP One app canceled all existing appointments, and then the CBP One app just went away. It just disappeared and stopped working. And there were tens of thousands of people that were in the pipeline on their way up, waiting at the U.S. southern border for their, they had to meet with CBP, and boom, just like that, gone, just canceled. So obviously a lot of very disappointed people down on the southern border. Sorry, hate it for you. Maybe don't try to come across the border illegally. And not only did Trump declare a national emergency at the border, which gives him the right to deploy troops down there, including the National Guard, but he instructed the Secretaries of Defense and Homeland Security to construct additional border barriers. So let's finish the wall, strengthen the wall, and that is going to act as a major speed bump for anybody trying to come across illegally. It's not going to stop the people coming across illegally, but it is going to dramatically make it more difficult, and so it'll slow the numbers and allow the Border Patrol to better allocate resources along the border in order to stop illegals from coming across and the gotaways. Trump also went on to suspend U.S. refugee admissions program resettlements, quote, until such a time as further entry into the United States of refugees aligns with the interests of the United States. And that has affected a whole bunch of people who were already in the pipeline to be allowed in as refugees, including 1,600 Afghans who were cleared to resettle into the United States, including the family members of active duty U.S. military personnel. And they all had their flights canceled after these orders, okay? Trump also ordered Homeland Security to terminate all categorical parole programs. Now, that is huge and is a great idea. And I'm so glad he did that, because what that does is that ends the ability of refugees from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela, among other countries, from claiming asylum in the United States under that temporary protected status, TPS, which let them come into the United States, work in the United States for a period of like 2 years, and that what kept getting renewed, and essentially those people just lived here for the rest of their lives. Almost everybody who came from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela had already been living outside of their home countries for some extended period of time, mostly years, up to 5 to 10 years, before they decided to come to the United States. So they had already moved from Cuba to Brazil, and they were making a living, doing just fine, surviving no problem in Brazil. And then when Joe Biden got elected, they said, hey, we can get more money if we go to the United States. And so they became economic migrants, coming to the United States and were given temporary protected status as if they had just fled Cuba, but they hadn't. Okay? Those were not refugees. And so that needed to be done away with. Good on Donald Trump for doing away with that. Trump reinstated the Remain in Mexico policy. That's just common sense. You should not be able to come into the United States and obtain all of the benefits of asylum while you're waiting to find out if you are even going to get asylum. Even if you don't get asylum, you just don't have to show up for your court date and they have to come find you in the United States. That's a bad system. And we got to fix that system. And Trump's Remain in Mexico policy is during his first tenure as president, reduced the number of illegal migrants coming across the southern border to a trickle. And that one program right there made a massive difference. And so reinstating that right off the bat, great idea. Fantastic. Trump also has taken the handcuffs off of U.S. Border Patrol and is allowing them to repeal, repatriate, and remove any alien coming across the U.S. southern border. That was something that the Biden administration did not allow. And so it's basically a giant pushback program. They catch them and they don't even allow them to come across. Nope, sorry. Head back south. You can't come across. Goodbye. Texas immediately started reinstalling all the border barriers in the Rio Grande River that the Biden administration had sued them to remove and force them to remove. So it is basically going to bring the number of people coming across the southern border illegally almost to zero overnight. Trump also signed an executive order to end birthright citizenship. Now, that is going to be a little bit tougher for him to do. Now, birthright citizenship basically allows anybody who was born on American soil, that doesn't actually have to be in the United States. So it would be, I think, good for Donald Trump to get birthright citizenship repealed, but it's going to take more than just one executive order to do that. Now, he also signed a whole bunch of executive orders that had to do with energy and the environment. He declared a national energy emergency and ordered expedited, deregulated drilling across the United States. And that is fantastic. The order specifically targeted energy production in Alaska and rescinded Biden's protections around the state's coastal areas and his bans on offshore drilling. So they're just going to start issuing permits like crazy. And we're going to start seeing pipelines being built, and the whole energy industry is just going to take off under the leadership of President Trump. It was so good to see that. He also signed an order withdrawing the United States from the Paris Climate Accords. That's something he did in his first term and is doing it again now. The United States should never have been a part of that. He's going to start exporting liquefied natural gas, which were paused by the Biden administration, and that should put more pressure on Russia because Europe will now be able to get more natural gas from us rather than getting it from Russia. A very, very good thing. Then he signed executive orders just restoring sanity to the U.S. federal government in terms of getting rid of diversity, equity, and inclusion, DEI, and all this transgender nonsense. He, much to my wonder and amazement, this executive order will reinstate the ban on the recruitment of transgender individuals into the U.S. military. It doesn't outright ban people who are transgender from serving. It just bans people from being recruited at this time. And the transgender people who are in the military, they're going to have to figure that out as well. He declared the federal government to adhere to the ancient knowledge that every culture throughout history has taken for granted up until the Biden administration, which was that there were only two genders, male and female. Fundamental and incontrovertible reality, he called it. And to say that's a good thing just shows how ridiculous the Biden administration had gotten by trying to recognize 37 genders and all this ridiculousness. That one executive order right there will go a long way towards making the U.S. military much more effective, much more cost effective, and be able to make it much more lethal to our enemies. That's fantastic. Uh, so he ordered the dismantling of all government DEI initiatives within 60 days. It eliminates policies that established several diversity initiatives, including one that included gender identity in sex discrimination protections. So that makes it much more difficult for men to use women's locker rooms and to play in women's sports. All very, very good things for America, for American culture. The problem with this is it needs to go further than an executive order. This sort of thing has got to be enshrined in law. It's got to be enshrined in law in every way we can, so that the next president who gets elected can't just undo all of this with one executive order, just like Trump did with all of Biden's. That's the problem with doing all this stuff with executive orders, is that the next president can sign his name one time and undo everything that was done before him through executive order. And in a nation that likes gridlock in its political class, in a nation that over the last 4 years has had a very hard time getting anything actually done in Congress because it was evenly divided, more or less, that was a good thing. But almost all the major changes that Biden was able to make, he did through executive orders, and he just watched all of his legacy get wiped clean with the one swipe of the pen. And more power to Donald Trump for that.